My people, thank you so much for checking out the Luttrell Show. Before we get started, I wanted to let you know about this free thing I put together for service and hospitality workers. It is called Bartender as a Business, and it is a free mini course. Now, just this one time, just because it's free doesn't mean it's worth less, but it's packed with information about how to get started with your side hustle and start your own business. Head to learn.jluttrell.com and sign up for the 5-day sprint to start your business today. Hello. Thank you for checking out the Luttrell Show, building businesses, bars, and brands. Now, today I'm joined by probably a non-traditional guest on my show. She's not even in the liquor business, but she has a lot of insight about how she runs her consulting business as a not-for-profit consultant. So she deals with boards and not-for-profits and fundraising and all kinds of other things. But I thought she would be a very interesting guest because she has an incredible amount of insight and a hell of a lot of empathy. I fell in love with her show, the Nonprofit Lowdown, on anywhere you get your podcasts. So without further ado, please welcome Rhea Wong. Rhea, thank you so much for coming on the show. You're not, most of the people that come on my show are like bar people and brand people and business. And I was just really quite taken with the nature of your business. So how would you characterize what it is that you do? What is it that you do?
All of the things. So first of all, Jason, happy to be on the show. And even though you interview a lot of bar people, I've been married to a bar person for a while. So I feel like I know a little bit about that business.
That totally counts.
Totally can. Yeah, married to it. Yeah, right. It's funny. We used to say in my not-for-profit, like, if you marry one of us, you marry all of us. So what I do is I was an executive director of a nonprofit here in New York for over 12 years. And recently, I started my own consulting firm. So I focus primarily on fundraising consulting, but I also do strategy work. And I work exclusively with nonprofits. So I myself I'm not a nonprofit.
That's important to note.
Yes, right, exactly.
Well, I mean, mama's got to eat,
Mama's got to eat. Mama's got bills to pay.
Right. But I mean, the impact and the kind of the opposite end of the spectrum is that when you get paid to work on projects, then that creates a lot of revenue for places that really need it. And I was looking through your website, and it's like you specialize in working with executive directors specifically.
Yeah.
And just because this is this is so true in like the restaurant world too. Just because you're a great bartender doesn't mean you're a great bar owner or and like once somebody puts you in charge, sometimes you don't have all the answers. So, I mean, how does that work? How do your clients find you, and how do you work with them?
Yeah, that's a good question. So primarily it's been word of mouth. So I was very lucky coming up in New York. I really made my career here. And so I have a pretty broad network. So I've been quite lucky, knock on wood, that I actually haven't really done serious biz dev. It's really all just been like people who know people and word of mouth. I think it's interesting that a lot of people, I think, forget that running a not-for-profit is actually running a business. And, much in the way that I think people who run bars might forget that it's actually a business or run restaurants, right? Mm-hmm. So I think a lot of executive directors, particularly founders, get really taken with this idea. I like to call it, petting the panda bears, right? Like, you love petting the panda bears, so you're going to start a nonprofit petting the panda bears. And literally, I mean, it's almost like a weekly thing where I have people coming up to me and asking like, oh, I want to start a nonprofit. How do I begin? And my first question is always like, well, do you like fundraising and management and board management and marketing and hiring and budgets? No? Well, then maybe you should just go find somewhere where you can pet the panda bears, right? Because I think people get very seduced by the romanticism of running a nonprofit, but they forget like it's actually a lot of work. And there's a lot of the business stuff that has nothing to do with petting the panda bears. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I think it, the way I see my role is helping people to kind of put a business lens on the work that they're doing for social good.
Mm-hmm. This is really well codified in the E-Myth. Have you read that one?
I have read the E-Myth.
Yeah. So it's like, just because you're a great pie baker doesn't mean that you're running a great bakery, for instance.
Yeah.
Is the recurring theme of that one. But the business end of what you do improves a lot of people's lives. And that must have been, I feel like you're if we're all born with an empathy muscle, I feel like yours was born like 10 times bigger than everybody else's. Or is that nature or nurture?
That's so sweet. Gosh. Yeah, I mean, look, I think everyone is really deeply empathetic. I think that some people may just be more comfortable putting that front and center than others. I mean, look, I was always that kid that like I worried about the dolphins and the panda bears. And, you know, I was really concerned about, you know, any number of causes as a kid. And I think that just sort of solidified more as a grown-up. But, you know, I've thought about this a lot because, look, I have, as Liam Neeson might say, I have a very particular set of skills, right? And that could be used in many different ways. And look, I happen to be pretty good at fundraising, which, like, frankly, anybody might say, like, well, I could have made a lot of money in the corporate sector. But at the end of the day, I think I've really solidified around what my purpose on this planet is. And I just like can't get excited about helping rich people make more money. Like what I really get excited about is, can I use my skills to change the world in a positive way? So, you know, I don't think that I'm any more or less empathetic than anybody else. I think I've just figured out how to make a career out of it.
Yeah, a lot of people lose interest after they find out how much work it is and how much thankless work it is, I feel like. Because I mean, if you look at what's going on right now, it's like I don't want to use the word popular, but it's in the forefront of a lot of people's minds, the current issues that have been around for hundreds of years.
Right.
And now it's like getting really, really serious, and it's people have time on their hands to actually do the work and start the learning process. And that's actually, I didn't realize that was happening right out front of your door. You live by the Barclays Center.
Yeah.
So you can see it every day. What I'm curious about is how this is impacting, because people are willing to have these conversations, and they're willing to learn, and they're willing to stop and listen and take a deep look at themselves. How does this impact like your consultations with your clients? Because I mean, it's, all things being equal, like if not-for-profits have a lot of similarities and parallels with for-profit organizations, like say a bar or a restaurant, how do you get the buy-in? And your last episode, I forget her name, but your last podcast of the Nonprofit Lowdown, which is an epic resource, by the way, she was very, very articulate about how to kind of cause this change within organizations. So yeah. How would you characterize that as far as your practice?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting question because what I think is interesting in the social justice sector is, even though we as a sector are committed to doing good in the world, I think that there have been a lot of practices that have upheld white supremacy and racial inequity. And I think what's happening right now is kind of a reckoning of people realizing not just that it's happening, but that they themselves might have been part of the problem. And I think it's a really interesting and tumultuous time. I mean, I think what's interesting in the not-for-profit sector is, I think there were a lot of assumptions made that, because I work in nonprofit, like I'm not racist. I don't have like racist views or like unconscious bias against Black people. And I think this has been like a real reckoning for people to like stand up and really start to interrogate themselves and their own assumptions. As far as my own consulting goes, I actually don't really consider myself to be a DEI consultant. And so I really see my role in this as like helping people get directed to high quality resources. But I think at the core of it is like, you have to be willing to do the work. And as an ally, so let me back up. I think it's been interesting because the whole conversation has really been so dichotomized between Black and white. But as an Asian American, I'm sort of left to wonder, like, well, what is my role in all of this? And as an ally, I've really tried to be front and center around using my voice and my privilege and my access to espouse the equity of specifically Black people in the sector. And so, you talk about my podcast. So recently I've made the pivot, and I haven't actually said this out loud. So you're the first person I've said this to. I am no longer featuring white men on my podcast. and I'm specifically featuring folks of color and women, and in particular women of color, because I think that we haven't had that much of a platform. And so I'm using like the various media and platforms that I have to really try to work on this equity agenda.
I think that I'm kind of with you on that. It's like we tend to hire and communicate with the people that are in our image. Mm-hmm. Have you noticed that? I mean, it's like I feel like my circle is like largely white people, and like mm-hmm. Trying to get outside of that. You wrote a really powerful blog you were kind of addressing kind of the Asian Americans' role in that, in the struggle with like the BLM movement specifically, but also kind of how you want to run us through that real quick?
Yeah. So I think being an Asian American is an interesting piece, because I think sort of as a group, we have been considered to be the model minority. And I think, white society has really used Asian Americans as a wedge issue to say like, oh, you guys are the good minority, right? Like you're not the ones who are like, you work hard, you're quiet, you like know how to like assimilate into white culture, right? And so I think like that's number one, which is when we as Asian Americans believe ourselves to be separate from everybody else and separate from other folks of color, like that's number one, a problem. And then number two, I think even within the Asian American community, there are a lot of very racist and white supremacist views that like we don't really even question. So like, we talk about like the racist uncle at Thanksgiving who says stuff, and it's always just like, okay, like that's just how he is. I'm just going to roll my eyes and move on. But like really what it means to be anti-racist is to actually call people out on it. Mm-hmm. And then I think what's also interesting is in Asian culture as a whole, like, first of all, I think it's hard because we as a group are not a monolith. Like we're a very diverse group, even within the Asian American community.
I was going to say, I mean, like just even saying African American or Asian American, it seems incredibly broad. We just don't seem to have the language to be able to, we don't seem to have the vocabulary to be able to segment.
Yeah.
But they are remarkably different communities. I mean, it's crazy.
But what I would say is like what's interesting in the Asian American community is I feel like definitions of success are basically like how white can you be, right? So how like are you going to these particular schools that are considered to be the best, the Harvards, the Stanfords, the Yales? Are you able to get a job that is considered to be high status, doctor, lawyer, banker? Mm-hmm. But really what it is about continuing to support these notions of like white supremacist culture. And simultaneously, I think there's like a deep anti-Blackness within the Asian American community that no one really ever talks about in a very open way. I mean, like I said it before, like I don't think that there's anyone more racist on this planet than an old Chinese woman, right? Like even the term that we use to describe Black people is incredibly derogatory. So, as a person in the world, I realized that like my commitment is I need to gather up all my Asians and like try to make a difference within that community.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not trying to make you responsible for teaching me what racism is, but I'm just, it's just such a broad topic that I feel like a lot of people, like me, for instance, to use myself as an example, it becomes overwhelming very quickly, and that's when then you feel bad for being overwhelmed, but you want to make a difference, you want to do something positive and meaningful, and it just like to the business owners that listen to the show, to the entrepreneurs and independents. What would you say would be a good way to get started? I mean, as a consultant, I mean, I understand that you don't do this kind of consulting, but I mean, just having listened to the last several of your podcasts, I mean, you guys get deep.
Yeah.
And,
yeah, I mean, I would say, number one, like Google it. There are any number of, resources out there, and I'd be happy to share stuff with you after this call that you can share with your audience. But I think the first thing is about self-education, right? So like pick up a book like How to Be Anti-Racist, My Grandmother's Hands, like any number of books out there. Take a training and commit to to anti-racist practices in your own life? Like for yourself, Jason, I mean, I know you're a dad. Like, so what sort of commitments are you willing to make to raise an anti-racist kid? Like, does that mean like engaging actively in conversations about race? Does that mean like having representation of different folks in the media that your kid sees? Actually, there was a CNN Sesame Street episode that I don't know if you saw.
Yeah.
So I think there are like big and small things that we can all do.
Well, I'm just trying to put this in the context of like a bar owner, like how, like now's the time that now is the time, like everybody's uncertain about what's going to happen. Nobody knows what's going to happen, but it's like, I just see it as an opportunity. As a business owner myself, I see this as an opportunity to build the business in the image that I want it to be.
Yeah.
Because it got real dark, real quiet, real fast.
Yeah.
So like, I'm trying to figure out how, in my trainings, in my coaching or in my client work, like how do I involve this in a meaningful level, without, getting, submitting to tokenism or like, just like making it a meaningful change and communicating in a way that inspires and affects real positive change, in the opportunity to actually rebuild your business.
Yeah. I mean, I think it starts with kind of first understanding how we define white supremacist culture. And I can send you a rubric on that. But I think the first key is to like really ask yourself, which of these practices have you been perpetuating? So it's, things like perfectionism, individualism, like sense of urgency, prioritizing the written word over any other type of communication. And then I think it's about HR, right? So it's about who am I hiring? Where am I sourcing them? What does the process look like? Is the process, is it unfairly advantaged to a certain type of person? When I'm hiring and retaining people, like, am I thinking about, like, how do I think about professional development opportunities? Like when certain, opportunities come up, like I know in your industry, things like, special trips and so on occur. Like, am I thinking about how to make those opportunities available to folks who may not otherwise be able to access them? One thing that you could think about, I mean, because look, I think your industry tends to be like pretty homogenous. And there was certainly that moment in like the late 2000s where it's like bearded white dudes in suspenders everywhere, right? And so like, could it look like both going out and recruiting, but also creating a pipeline of diversity? So, Joaquin and I talk about a lot, where is this talent of color coming from, and where are women of color coming up from? And I think so often we look at just the people that we know, and we look under the streetlight, so to speak. But are there specific things that folks can be doing to both mentor, sponsor, and recruit other folks from different backgrounds?
Yeah, and it's such a weird time right now because it's the world needs bartenders, but they can't have them right now. Mm-hmm. And so like I'm trying to urge people to diversify and get out of your comfort zone and basically start a business.
And I'm 100% on that train always.
It's like, come on. It's like, it sucks that you can't do the thing that you feel like you were meant to do, but there are a lot of ways to deliver hospitality and leverage your skills and your tolerance for bullshit to, improve somebody's business or their lives. And so, I mean, if this, if we can't give women of color an opportunity in that arena right now, because we're, not there yet, apparently, then let's get in business. I feel like it's such an empowering thing to say, hey, listen, this is my service. Nobody else does it like I do. And this is what my number is. And let's get to work.
Yeah. I mean, I think too, let's also talk about capital, because I know so often in your business, being able to do what you do is reliant on investors. And so investors generally tend to be white men who like to give money to other white men. And so I guess my question to your audience would be like, how are they leveraging their position on behalf of others? Like, hey, this is a really great opportunity. I know someone who happens to be a woman of color who would be a really good investment for this. And so, and I also think about the question of hospitality. Like, I think, communities of color have such great models and examples of being hospitable, and women in particular tend to be the ones that are at the center of warm, hospitable, family-like environments. And so how are we actually able to leverage what they know and what they bring in from their culture to the broader world?
Mm-hmm. I mean, I have to mention that, the whole tipping system, the origin of the tipping system is fraught anyways. I mean, it's like the whole system of paying people as little as legally possible is where we come from. And there have been some very outspoken and articulate people talking out about that, but it's true. I mean, it's a kind of a fucked up business. Now is the time for the reckoning.
Can I add to that though?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if you have folks who are listening to this or trying to get into the consulting gig, but I would say that as a consultant, there is actually such opportunity in challenging the status quo. And if you are able to really articulate and monetize sort of what is wrong with your industry and provide a solution to what is wrong, like that's where you're going to find the money.
The riches are in niches, that's for sure. One thing that struck me when I was listening to your podcast was that, you guys talk about mission statements, and when you talk about board members, like your board members for the not-for-profits are typically people who write checks and like are in big investors and they pitch in a lot monetarily. There's so many parallels between that and the restaurant business, because those are our investors typically. And one thing that keeps on coming up in your show is that you always talk about mission statements and what do we stand for? What is our cause? And everything revolves around kind of what the why is. And I feel like a lot of times bars and restaurants don't have that that centralized why. It's like we do this really, really well, but the conversation kind of stops short of why do we do this? What is our contribution to the community? But can you tell me about what makes a good mission statement and like what is important about? And is it elastic, or does it have to be a tattoo? Like, is it?
I mean, I would say that it pretty much has to be kind of your source of truth. I mean, it is like, for those of you who have not seen Simon Sinek's Start with the Why on TED, I think your why is pretty specific to you, but it is like the reason you should be getting up in the morning. And I think so often, you're right, which is in businesses, I think we think of the why, the reason for being is to like make money. But I think especially amongst younger folks, like the millennials and the Gen Zs coming up, they need something more than just making money. And at the end of the day, like, I think it's a personal thing. Like, why do you get up in the morning? Like, what is the thing that you are bringing to the world that is unique to you? And like, why, and can you attract other people to the thing that you believe to be true in the world, or the thing that you want to be true in the world, right? So like, at the end of the day, like, if you start a bar, sure, I'm sure like you can be wildly successful, but in order to really embed that in the hearts and minds of people, you should stand for something other than just making money. You know, people love things because it hits their heart, because it makes them feel something. It makes them feel part of something deeper. And I don't think that you can get that if you yourself don't have something deeper. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And it's not to say that you can't be not-for-profit. It's not to say that you can't seek profit as well.
Sure.
Like guys,
please make all the money.
Yeah, make all the money, but also do good. And there's this whole thing, social entrepreneurship, and where people they make money, but they also have a purpose and they have a cause behind what they're doing.
Yeah, I mean, I would say there's an interesting exercise of values evaluation, and so ultimately it helps you to assess like where your values lie. And I think if you are able to develop a values-driven business, like it is a business that will continue to renew you. Because like, look, at the end of the day, running a business is really hard and it can be soul-sucking, right? And it's like annoying a lot of the time when like your staff members are like pissed off about something, or like your delivery didn't show up, or like this grant didn't go through, or like any number of annoying things happen when you're running a business. But I think if you have a deeper purpose, those like annoying things can be overlooked because you have something bigger. I always think about like Luke Skywalker. Like, he had a mission. he had a vision. Like there was a reason that he left his little garden, right? And so if we can all get really clear about what we care about and what our mission is, then I think a lot of the little annoyances fall
Yeah, absolutely. I think so too. I'm just trying to think of like in the not-for-profit world, there's also a significant reliance on volunteer labor, right? Like just people going out because they believe in the mission, they want to go do good and help out with. I mean, it depends on the kind of company it is, right? Kind of organization it is.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on what it is. So, for example, right now I'm working with an ed tech company, and unfortunately, there's not a lot of room for volunteerism because it's such a highly technical project that they're working on. But, I've also worked in not-for-profits where we have volunteer days where employees from the community can come in and, interview kids or like run
Stuff
a career
envelopes or
day,
something, right?
stuff envelopes, whatever it may be. I will say though that I think these volunteer opportunities can, frankly, just be a little bit annoying to organize.
Oh yeah,
and
no,
so
I bet.
Yeah, like a lot of times corporations will come up and be like, we want to do like a volunteer day, but we're only available on like this date for like this many hours, and we need you to like have something to do for like 20 volunteers. And it's like, okay, so I'm going to like design something so that I can get the $10,000 from your corporate foundation. So I don't know where you were going with that question, but I think it depends.
Yeah, I'm just saying like it's like some people, it's hard to motivate people when they're working for free is one thing, but the bigger picture, what I was getting at was that like it's easier to align a lot of people if they have a common vision and if they all understand what the purpose is. So you can get people to work for free because they're advancing the mission that they're aligned with.
Mm-hmm.
I think that with any business, if people don't understand the why of your business, then it's going to be difficult to get them to do whatever you want. But as far as team building is concerned, and as far as team alignment. And getting everybody on the same page. Like, I think, have you ever read Essentialism?
That's
I think
one thing.
One thing. I feel like we read the same books.
Yeah.
I used to be embarrassed. I'm like, yeah, I read all these self-helpy business books, but you know what? There's some wisdom there. And
who's really good at this? Eric Castro. Read some really good books. Yeah, you should get Eric Castro on your show because he and I geek out about all the books we read.
That is not surprising at all. That guy's so amazingly positive all the time. San Diego. I'm telling you.
San Diego. I know. The West Coast calls.
Yeah. What are you thinking?
I'd love to be bi-coastal, but then again, it's like the two most expensive cities in the country. So, that's a problem.
Are you able to cope with being remote?
Well, yeah, I mean, I've always been remote, so it's like not really that much of a change for me.
Oh, nice. Okay,
yeah.
good.
So a lot of my clients I work with remotely anyway. Like I'm not really in person. So it's not really been a huge difference, except for the fact that I usually work at my local cafe, but I haven't been able to do that. But for the most part, it's been not that disruptive.
Are you the only employee?
I am the only employee.
Employee one.
Employee one. I have subcontractors that I work with for very specific things. I know you and I talked about virtual assistants, but I mean, small is the new big, I think.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I have three different virtual assistants that each work like maybe 2 or 3 hours a week. They have very, very specific isolated roles. So I don't have like a personal assistant. I have one person that does the podcast. I have one person that works with me specifically on some social media stuff. And then one person that just focuses on automation.
Nice. Automation. That is the key, my friend. You're all about scaling the biz.
Oh my goodness. Yes. I've been banging that drum for a long time.
Yep.
I mean, that's my ideal client is like basically you, or somebody who owns their own business who's just like, oh my God, I'm working 75 hours a week and I'm not getting anything done. I can't see what's happening.
Yeah.
So how do you leverage automation?
I wish I leveraged it better, but I've set up Zapier or Zapier. I never know. Is it Zapier?
Zapier makes you happier.
Zapier makes you happier. Yeah. So I have some automations around like people who register for my webinars that then get uploaded to my MailChimp. I have folks that I hire to deal with my social media because I'm like, I'm old and I just can't do it. I think for me, thinking about starting my business, I had to get super clear on what it is I was actually good at and what it is I should be outsourcing. And I think especially when you're a single person, you're like, well, but it's just like cheaper for me to do it. Yeah, it's cheaper, but like there's an opportunity cost there, right? So like, sure, I can mess around with social media and like spend a couple hours figuring that out. Or I could hire someone to do it and spend those hours actually making money doing the thing I'm really, really good at. So I think we as solopreneurs have to be kind of ruthless with our time and honest with ourselves about what we're good at and what we're not good at. I think especially when you're starting out, you do tend to take on consulting clients that are probably not a great fit. They're like, I just need money in the door, which like, fine, we get it. Like we all have to do it. But I think the more and again, I'm only in my second year. So like, I'm talking like I know everything, but like, I think the more you do the work and the more you realize like what clients you actually enjoy working with and which clients you can actually add the most value to, the more you can niche down. And I think this is true of not-for-profits too, is like we have to not be afraid to niche and be really super clear about who we're serving and who our people are, because like I've had this happen so many times. I've talked to nonprofits and I'm like, so who are your donors? And they're like, everybody. I'm like, really? Like I literally had a board meeting once where one of my board members was like, well, if everybody in New York gave us $1, and I was like, okay, number one, do you know everybody in New York?
Well enough to ask for $1.
Right. So that's like thing one, which is a dumb thing to say. Thing two is like, not everybody is going to be about this cause. And they shouldn't be. Like, we need lots of people who care about lots of different things. Like, my cause happened to be education, but I really need some people to care about, like, the environment. And I need other people to care about, like, policy reform. And I need other people to care about, like, whatever other cause out there. And so, like, not everybody's going to be your cause. But I think the more you can be specific about who your people are and why they care about your thing, the better your conversations are, the better your marketing is, the better your business development is, the better your pitch is.
Yeah, and the more value you can provide them, for sure. As being a donor or customer or whatever it is. But I love the customer avatar worksheet where you like create this ideal customer and what are they, what's their job, how much school did they go to, like what are their hobbies. Being able to identify exactly who you're communicating with is just it's a great way to just 86 all the clutter.
Jason, can I blow your mind
yes,
about
please.
something? So. I'm taking a course right now, which we can talk about, but they're talking about customer avatar 2.0. So it's not just about the demographics of your customer, but in fact, the way that you think about it is actually not about who they are, which is pretty static, but rather who they want to become. And so when you kind of get in the space of like, let's say you're starting a business about accountants, right? So like at the core of it, you're like, thinking in the old way, it's like, okay, well then like what problem are accountants having? Whatever. In the new way of like 2.0 avatars, you're like, what transformation does this group of consultants want? And like, that's what I'm marketing to. So like I'm talking to accountants who are looking for like to increase their business by 10x. And then all of a sudden it becomes much more specific and you're talking in the realm of the transformative, not just like who you are today. I don't know if that makes sense.
That makes total sense. The challenge that I'm having right now, maybe you've got some advice for me, is convincing people that they have to change, that they don't have any choice.
Well, what kind of change are you asking them to make?
I'm asking them to think of their future and how they think of money in the terms of self-determination, as in what if this virus lasts for the next year and the world doesn't need bartenders, servers, hospitality workers, chefs. So what are you going to do next? And what is the action that you can take for yourself on your own behalf to become completely independent of any one job?
So what are you selling? Like what's the...
I guess I'm selling the bulk of my. I'm supposed to be interviewing you.
I know. I'm a podcaster.
I know. I guess I'm selling the bulk of my knowledge, because by expressing how much information I've earned over the last 10 years in business for myself, I am hoping to express value to my potential clients.
So can I offer an idea, which is I think you're selling the how, which I think is hard. What I think you need to be selling is the result, which is financial freedom. Like,
it's just like, I'm just trying not to be like corny about it. Like,
corny sells.
Okay. All right, fine. I'll be
Corny sells, and also like simplicity sells, because the thing that you just explained to me, like, oh, and then like I'm changing my mindset. I'm like, oh, that sounds like really freaking complicated. But if you're like, I am going to teach you how to like secure your financial future, or like take control of your financial future, then it's like, oh, okay. And then like, then you can get into the how, but like sell me on an idea, sell me on a desired future state, right?
Amazing. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. No, I don't need to write that down because it's so simple.
Yeah. Just like sell people on the way that they want to be in the future. It's like, it's like selling, like people who sell like fitness things or whatever, like they don't talk about like, oh, and then you do like this many reps, and like, no, I'm going to sell you on this idea that you're going to be hot and like fit. And then people are like, yeah, that's what I want, that future state.
Yeah. The transformation.
That's exactly right.
Right. Okay. Well, so, did I just get a consultation? Is that how you talk to your clients?
Yeah, pretty much. So actually I just did this exercise this morning. I was like, what am I really good at? And I realized that one of the things I'm really good at is like cutting through bullshit. Like I can cut through clutter pretty quickly and be like, okay, here's what I think the thing is.
I know you're into yoga. Do you have like a routine that you do every day?
Oh gosh, not every day. I mean, so I've been practicing yoga for 20 years, and I try to do it a couple times a week. But I will tell you, like, one of the hardest things, and it's such like a bougie problem, but I'm going to say it anyway. The biggest problem I've had with this quarantine is I was on a 5 to 6 day a week swimming routine. And so I would fire up my business podcast and do my laps, and not being able to swim has been like the single biggest psychological obstacle that I've had since this quarantine started. Because I just think like physical release has been such an important thing for me.
Yeah, and swimming's hard too. I think people kind of underestimate how hard it is. Pulling your body through water is not the easiest thing in the world.
Here's the thing. I think swimming is hard. Oh, this is actually perfect. It's coming full circle. I think swimming, like business, is hard when you're not going with the flow. So when you're like, to your point, if you're trying to convince people of something that they're not convinced of, that's always going to be hard. You're always going to like pull. If you're going with the flow and you're like, hey, you want to be like financially free and like financially sound, like, then let's talk. And so you have to like swim with the tide of like the thing that they already want.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm trying to make the analogy of like where the fear is and all that. People are just so afraid to take the leap and just be like, okay, I'm this is what I do, and this is the service that I sell.
Yeah, well, and there's so many analogies actually to what I do in fundraising, because I think before you get to the tactics of like, this is how you do it, you have to work on the inside of like, what are you afraid of? And with fundraising, it's very much afraid of like rejection or fear of failure or like my baggage about money. Baggage about money is a huge one.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm sure you work with in your business too.
100%. Oh, like my money mindset was fucked up for a really long time. Like I didn't like the way I was raised or whatever, like my upbringing was that such that like I felt like I was only worth what people were willing to give me.
Yep.
And and I never realized that there was, limitless potential for how much money I can earn. I just have to kind of eliminate barriers to get to it.
That's right. How did you get to that switch for yourself?
It's been a very interesting journey for the last several years. A lot of it comes with having very lean months when it's just like, wait a second, it's not, it's been really quiet. What's going on? Is it the world or is it me? Mm-hmm. And then you make the obvious conclusion that it's you, like you're the problem. And so, you just do for me, it was just about some serious reflection and journaling and just kind of thinking like, wait a second, like I do provide value to the world. What I do is important, and what I do does improve people's lives. And, and then I just honestly, I worked backwards. I set a number. I was like, this is the number that I want to earn. This is how much I'm willing to work. And then I established an hourly rate. And then I decided immediately after that I wasn't going to work by the hour.
Yeah, no, I was going to say hourly rates are the worst. Don't ever do it.
Yeah.
But yeah, like 100%, because I think so many of us are raised with like a scarcity mindset. And, for me, and I talk about this all the time, like in fundraising, I had a really messed up perspective about giving and about charity because like, my parents are both children of immigrants. And so they both grew up very, very poor, but they both went to college. Like we grew up in a very middle-class family. And I remember when I was a kid, I was growing up in San Francisco in the 80s where there were a ton of homeless people then as there are now. And I remember like being a kid, probably like 9, and I gave a quarter to a homeless guy and I got in trouble because my parents were like, "Oh, so you have so much money now, you can just give it away." Right. And I was like, oh, that's the money message I received, which is like scarcity, hoarding, like there's not going to be enough for everybody.
Work hard. You have to work hard to make money. You have to work really hard.
Well, you have to work hard, but also money does not flow. Like money is to be hoarded. Money, like there's not going to be enough. So we have to like save for a rainy day, always, always, always. And so, and I equated that with safety and security. And so when I started fundraising, I would project that onto people like, oh, I'm asking them for their security. Like, because I assumed that they thought about money the same way I thought about money. And it wasn't really till I like examined those assumptions. I was like, well, is that true? And like, why would I assume that everyone has the same thoughts about money as I have? That I really started to be able to be an effective fundraiser.
Yeah. Yeah. I just think that's such an important distinction. Especially for the bartenders listening. It's just like, how much money you make is determined by the job that you have pretty much. But at the baseline, everybody makes as little as legally possible. If they could pay you less legally, they would. And it's not because the owners are stingy or it's like because they're bad people. It's just because that's the way the system is set up. And that's
it's a broken system.
It's a broken system for sure. And I think that we're finding this out.
Well, and I would say too, from like a bartender perspective, there are like a lot of very unhealthy habits with money, right? So it's like you're flush and you go out and you like blow a bunch of money and you're like treating your friends and whatever. And then there are lean weeks where you're like, oh shit, I'm I'm broke. And so again, I would say that probably comes in the same place of like scarcity, right? Which is, when I'm flushed, like, it's all good, but somehow I told myself the message that I don't deserve to build wealth in a real way. Or like my value comes from like treating other people and like being, as my grandmother would say, good time Charlie.
Yep. Yeah, no, I've been there. I mean, like, have like a really good night and you spend it at a bar.
Right. Exactly.
It's like, oh, come on.
Yeah. But I will say too, like I had a CFO once who I think I was like bummed out because I didn't get a grant or something. And I was like dragging and he was like, Rhea, money should not be a mood alterer, like either good or bad. It's just money. I was like, oh, it's just money. It's just money. And like, it is renewable. You can always get more of it. What you can't get more of is time. And so for me, the question is always like, how am I spending my time in order to leverage to get the money that I need to live the kind of life I want?
I guess that leads me to my next question. What's your retirement look like? When are you going to retire?
When am I going to retire? Well, according to my retirement calculator, 65. But no, my intention is to like make a lot of money. And
even that's hard to say sometimes, right? Like, I mean, it took me a long time to say, like, I want to make a lot of money. I want to be wealthy.
Yeah.
And a lot of people have a hard time saying that because they get this icky feeling about that you have to be like a bad person or that you, or that you like it's ill-gotten gains or something like that to make a lot of money. But that's just not true. Like you can do wonderful things for a lot of people and change the world and still make a good amount of money.
Yeah. I mean, I intend to make a lot of money, and I also intend to do so partially because I want to support the causes that I love. And I also want to be an example because I think women of color in particular have been so undercapitalized that I want to be an example of what it looks like to actually be unapologetic about making money. And I want to show other people how to do it as well.
And my goodness, would you be the best person in the world to pitch? Could be like, listen, I've been there. I'm gonna contribute. You don't have to do the whole thing.
Yeah. Well, it's funny to me. I was on a call. I'm not telling tales out of school, but I was on a call with a young woman. She was a young African-American woman, and we were talking about fundraising, and she was asking my advice about, her next move. And I was like, well, okay, how much do you want to make? And she was like very tentative. And she's like, well, I'd like maybe like to make 70,000. And this is in fundraising. Mm-hmm. And I yelled at her and I was like, absolutely not. You need to be thinking minimum $90,000 to 100. Mm-hmm. You are a black unicorn right now. And I need you to know that. But I think women of color always underpitch, we always undersell, we always underask, because we've received all of these messages in the world that like we can't ask for too much, you can't fly too close to the sun.
Right. And I think I read this on your blog actually. It's like especially black women, like they're expected to be perfect all the time and make 60 cents on the dollar while doing it. Yep.
They're asked to be perfect all the time, and they're underpaid and they're underappreciated and they underask. Right. And so I think it's a twofold problem. It's like they're in organizations and cultures that don't necessarily see their value, and then they themselves also don't see their value. So it's like this constant compounding problem of being underpaid and under asking and under pitching. And what I told this young woman was like, listen, we're in a moment right now where literally every nonprofit is asking to hire a person of color, and particularly a black fundraiser, because they are like unicorns. And so understand your value, understand like basic microeconomic theory, which is like the demand is high, you get to set the price.
Mm-hmm.
And she was like, what? And I was like, you got to think like a mercenary. Like, and what's so interesting is on my pod, I often get people who pitch me, and it's like uniformly white men. Like white men have no problem talking about themselves. They have no problem talking about how awesome they are. Like, I'm here. You're welcome. Right.
Yeah.
But then I always reach out to women of color. I'm like, I'd love to have you on my pod. And like their first response is always like, me? Do I know enough? Like, yes, you. You absolutely know enough.
Well, hopefully my pitch to you was it was clearly good enough, and I hopefully I flattered you as much as I said that I would.
Well, I appreciate it. Actually, I don't often get invitations to come on people's pods, so this has been fun.
Well, I find that people who have their own podcasts are the best podcast guests because they're not used to getting questions. And so like the thought around, doing the whole thing, put the earplugs in and get the microphone out and plug it into your computer, that part's easy. And there's usually some sort of a tech onboarding that happens.
Yeah.
But podcast owners are the best podcast guests for sure.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. I think people don't actually understand how hard it is to be a good podcast host and ask good questions, because I think that in this society, we're so busy talking at people that we don't actually learn how to listen.
This has been an experience for me, and it's why I keep coming back to do it, is because it's definitely an exercise in active listening. And I still have a long way to go, obviously, but it's I'm just glad that you came on, because it's very difficult to we always kind of operate in our bubble. I would normally have Joaquin on. But I'm very happy to make the parallels between the business that you're in and the business that I think our listeners are primarily in, because I think that there's a lot of similarities. And the main difference is that it's extremely altruistic what you do, and it's very big on empowerment and really helping people in a meaningful way. And I just very much appreciate your time.
Oh, thank you, Jason. This has been really fun. Thanks for inviting me.
Of course. So I'll do the whole outro stuff, and I'll make sure that all your links and stuff are on there.
Cool.
But is there anything that you'd want to share with my people?
With your people? No. I mean, look, I think you all have picked a really interesting and exciting industry, and I think it's really hard to make money and build wealth. And so anything that you can do to think about how to set the foundations for a wealth building enterprise above and beyond just like a service job is going to be the key to your future happiness. So sign up with Jason to learn how Financial freedom might work for you.
Yeah, it's like now's a really good time to get that side hustle going, and then maybe that side hustle becomes your only hustle, or
Well,
the
I would
first
also
hustle.
say too, like, I think it's so funny because like I think bartenders are by nature a little bit contrarian. Like they're the ones who are like getting the tattoos and like I wasn't really a student, but in some ways are also really beholden to these rules of like, well, I'm not allowed to make this amount of money, or like I couldn't possibly do this, or like who am I to start a business? Like, don't you have to have a lot of fancy degrees and It's like, no, you need to add value and you need to be able to solve problems for people. And if you can do that, then you can make money.
And ask for it. And you have to say, this is what I do. This is my number. Can I have that, please? And I will get to work.
Yeah.
Yeah. A lot. Like, I mean, it just the through line that I see with people starting their own businesses from service industry jobs is that they have a difficult time with marketing and sales.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's right. Well, which is so funny because it's like such a cash-based business. So you would think that like if you're used to working for tips, you're used to working like you're selling yourself on some level, right?
Yep. What is the difference between a tipped employee and an entrepreneur? Is my question.
Yeah. Well, you're not working for tips. You're hopefully going for that big money.
Totally. All right, Rhea, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Jason, so fun.
I'm so glad I was able to catch you, and thank you so much again.
Yeah, thank you. Always a good time. Say hi to Brittany for me.
I will. So this interview for me was pretty awesome. I mean, I feel like I actually got a free consultation out of it. But in that consultation, we learned a little bit more about what Rhea does for a living, how she helps her clients, how she builds her business. And I got a good little talking to about my sales pitch, which I very much appreciate. You know, coming from a professional fundraiser, that is a very good piece of advice that I will absolutely take. So I hope you enjoyed this episode with Rhea Wong, a industry adjacent, not-for-profit consultant. Be sure to check out the show notes for a brief summary of the show and links to all the stuff that we talked about. A special thanks to Danny Messina for editing and post-producing the show. If you like the show, you might enjoy another project we started called The Industry Distilled. We read the industry news so you don't have to. We go live on Thursday. Our episodes air on Friday mornings at 9 o'clock. You can find The Industry Distilled anywhere you get your podcasts. I like to keep these shows super short and dense. If you have any thoughts, questions, or ideas, please be sure to reach out to me at Jason Luttrell on Twitter and Instagram, or search for Jason Luttrell on Facebook and LinkedIn. I'm also on YouTube now. If you got anything out of our time together, you can thank me by simply sharing this with another person. If you loved the show, please hit the subscribe button, leave a rating, review, or comment on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, Pocket Cast, iHeartRadio, or wherever you get your podcasts. Please stay well, and thank you for checking out The Luttrell Show. We'll see you next time.